the third session of the Irish Writers' Centre Climate Writing Group, Writing for a Change 2023. This series of 6 online sessions is made possible by our partnership with Dublin UNESCO City of Literature. A big thanks for their funding, and as always, sincere thanks to our main funder, the Arts Council of Ireland. Very briefly, Writing for a Change is a series of information and writing sessions for writers of every genre. The overall theme is awareness of the planet and encouraging writers to promote positive climate solutions in their work. The Climate Writing Group was established in July 2021, proposed and curated by writer Lynn Buckle, and launched by special guest, former President of Ireland, Mary Robinson. There is no fee for attending these sessions. They are a gift to all writers to take away and use in their work. Special guest host for the evening is author Kerri Dochartaigh, who will be joined by award-winning writer author Robert Macfarlane. We will also be joined this evening by the Moth magazine co-founders, Rebecca O'Connor and Will Govan. We are very honoured to welcome all of our esteemed guests this evening. You will be able to ask questions through the Q&A function, and we will and Tom will put the link to our newsletter in the chat function. So do please sign up for our newsletter, because then you'll find all the latest. Our newsletter comes out every week, and you'll find all the latest news and events. I'd like now to introduce you to Kerri, who will take it from there.
Thanks a million, Betty, and thank you to all of our incredible folk.
So I'll just very briefly say a few words about you, Kerri, if you don't mind.
Sorry.
You're too modest. Kerri Dochartaigh is the author of Thin Places, which was highly commended by the Wainwright Prize for Nature Writing 2021. In Thin Places, a mixture of memoir history and nature writing, Kerri explores how nature kept her sane and helped her heal. And she asks us to remember that the land we fight over is much more than lines on a map. She has written for The Guardian, Irish Times, BBC, Winter Papers, and others. Cacophony of Bone, her second book, was published in May 2023. Thank you to Kerri, and I'll leave it with you now.
Thanks a million, Betty, and everyone at the Irish Writers' Centre, and thank you, Robert, and welcome. Robert Macfarlane is a writer of books about nature, people, and place, including Underland, The Old Ways, Landmarks, and Mountains of the Mind, and with artist Jackie Morris, The Lost Words and The Lost Spells. His work has been widely adapted for film, television, stage, radio, and music, and he's collaborated with artists and musicians, including Johnny Flynn, Karine Polwart, and Cosmo Sheldrick. He's a professor of literature and the environmental humanities at the University of Cambridge. Robert, it's an absolute honour to have you here, and many, many congratulations from all of us on winning the first ever Western International Award. I was really moved, as I always am, by how you word things, by the way you shared this news with the world. It was a tweet that was something along the lines of, "This news fell from a clear blue sky." And that's something I've been thinking of so much recently, and your tweet kind of plays into it. The manner in which we process information and goings on, you know, how we place things that are out with our control into the parts of our lives over which we do have some kind of control, if that makes sense. So I wanted to just welcome you and to ask you to begin with, what actions have you been taking recently that have helped you to feel kind of positive about things on this beautiful blue skied planet?
Well, what a wonderful introduction, Kerri. Thank you so much. It's folks, I've been bowled over by Kerri's writing since I first met it online, and we've corresponded for many years, and this is the first time we've shared speech, and it makes me happy. So bless you to the Irish Writers' Centre for making this happen. And everyone who's out there, maybe just say in the chat where you're listening from, where you're joining from. I love these kind of archipelagic geographies that these online events make possible. I'm speaking from the border of Hampstead Heath at an 81st birthday party, which is downstairs. Oh, lovely! Lots of hellos coming up. That's wonderful. We got Arizona and Washington and Skibbereen all together. A clear blue sky. Yeah, the news of the prize did fall from a clear blue sky. I didn't know it existed. I didn't know anything about it until I got a phone call as I was driving back through the Scottish Highlands, having been on the Isle of Skye, making programs with the BBC. And I'm very glad to say that I'd swapped to the passenger seat when I took the phone. Otherwise I'd have been in the ditch with surprise. But no, that was a lovely thing, and that amazing generosity, that kind of keep going. That's what. So there are circumstantial encouragements like that. But I think the thing which has most encouraged me recently has been the company I've kept with people who just astonish me. I'm working on this book about more than human rights called Is a River Alive? And the people I've met, they won't give up. They won't give up, and they recognize that this is not a quantum switch gate. It's not an either we are lost or we are saved. It is that every single increment of every degree of every level matters and is to be fought for those who don't have the voices to fight for it themselves, whether those are marginalized human communities or more than human communities, whose voices we are only just beginning to dream of understanding. That's gonna matter over the coming years. We're learning to listen to wail. There's going to be speakers coming. Just the babble of voices, the babel of wonder that we live in. So young climate activists in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu, working against incredibly difficult circumstances, young activists in Ecuador facing violence from cartels, mining companies, even government paramilitaries. I don't have problems like these. So if they can keep hope up, I have to be able to as well.
Totally. And it reminds, what you've just given voice to reminds me of another writer that I know we both really value, Rebecca Tamosh. And in Strangers, there's that section where she talks about privilege and how that actually we should, yes, we might have the choice to be able to put our heads down in the ground, but what about all those other people who don't? And actually something about that speaks truth.
Right.
In your in one of your books, you say words act as compass. Place speech serves literally to enchant the land, to sing it back into being, and to sing one's being back into it. And I know that very much like another one of my greats, Robert Macfarlane, you're taken with the power of naming what it might mean to refer to the non-human world in a way so different from what we've long been doing. Recently on these calls, we've been exploring the word he instead of it. Robert Macfarlane's really beautiful thing. And I wonder if you would mind sharing your view, extending your view on the possibility that language might hold as we navigate climate and species emergency. What power does language hold?
Huge power. I think I write somewhere in Underland, it's a geological force of the Anthropocene. Language is geomorphological, it's geological, it leaves deep time legacies. The ways we dream of, metaphorize, figure, place, determines how we behave to it. We're broadly lost in discourse, and so where you find compasses in language, you should hold them tight. Robin speaks of the grammar of animacy, this wonderful phrase that she has at the heart of braiding sweetgrass, and that's a form of language which recognizes and indeed generates reciprocity. So she gives that. She thinks about pronouns in that way. Writing about rivers all of the time at the moment, and I took a decision very early in Is a River Alive that I would only ever use the word who rather than which. So the river Who flows from the springs near my house, the river Rio Los Cedros, Who rises in the cloud forest of Los Cedros. And suddenly, and you have to get the spanner into your brain, but that's because grammar is sedimented presumption in many ways. And so when you talk it in the sense of the TORQUE of talk, it kind of hurts first.
Yeah.
But but then it has the power of revelation. So I want that to be kind of a surprise when people first read the book. I don't say, now I'm going to only call rivers who. I'm just going to call them who from the beginning.
Totally. And I suppose that there's a real power in that decision making, and of course it has ripples, and you're talking about it on this call, and we've got people listening in from across the world, and it makes people think. I wonder if now would be an okay stage for me to ask you if you would mind reading us something from your work, and then we'll head back into some more questioning, if that's okay.
Yeah, I just say how lovely it is to see all these places and voices and names in the chat there. So some familiar to me. Hi, Joyce, and most new. But how lovely to gather this community here. Thanks for listening, folks. Yeah, I thought. I mean, I won't read for long, but I'd love to hear the questions and thoughts that you have. But we were thinking a lot about more than human voices. I knew we would be, and Moths among them, because of Kerri's work is fluttered through by Moths, and we have the Moth magazine coming on, and so it seemed a very mothy theme. This very strange book, Ness, that I wrote a few years back, is I never know what to call it, like an Anthropocene prose poem or a mystery play, but it seeks to imagine these kind of superhero figures, but they're composites. They're land come to life. They're made of. There's a he, a she, an it, a they, and an as. Those are the 5 figures, and they're gradually converging on this site of kind of nuclear explosion, though it's never made quite, and trying to overcome it, overwhelm it. So I thought I'd read just a little from this character, she. She nears Ness. Her skin is lichen, and her flesh is moss, and her bones are fungi, and she breathes spores. Spores spread as she breathes out, sucked back into her gills with each deep breath in, gusted ahead with each deep breath out. She is wired into the world. There are miles of her in a pinch of soil. Trees speak through her, and as she passes houses, passes trees, passes cars, she leaves herself behind. Moss clump on roof tile, wall edge, lichen tag on road sign, fungus glowing on tree bark. Here and there she marks certain children as they sleep, a fingertip touch on the inside of a wrist, the back of a knee, a place where green can enter and grow, making over time a child of moss, a child of ash, a child of beech, a child of lichen. She was one of them once, and her skin now greenly seethes. I'll stop that there, though. Her character kind of goes, she's a sort of Scythian, I suppose, a kind of fairy figure, and she's joined by these other 4 sort of forces and forms who come together, and the as figure can only ever be spoken of comparatively as X is Y, as Z is A. And then something a little bit more orthodox from me, perhaps. I thought I'd think about from the beginning of this book, Underland, which took me far too many years to write, really. But it's about deep time, and I kept saying to my editors, like, you can't hurry. That deep time. It's dealing with 4.2 billion years of Earth history. Just give me space. So, but I was thinking about these unburials that we're living through in this accelerated time of climate change, these things that are rising to the surface that we thought were buried. So there's a little passage about that, and then I'll just say a few words about deep time and its dangers, and I think possibilities, and then I'll stop. In the Arctic, ancient methane deposits are leaking through windows in the earth opened by melting permafrost. Anthrax spores are being released from reindeer corpses buried in once frozen soil, now exposed by erosion and warmth. Retreating alpine and Himalayan glaciers are yielding the bodies of those engulfed by their ice decades before. Across Britain, recent heat waves have caused the imprints of ancient structures, Roman watchtowers, Neolithic enclosures to shimmer into view as crop marks visible from above, aridity as X-ray, the land's submerged past rising up in parched visitation. In northwest Greenland, an American Cold War missile base sealed under the ice cap 50 years ago and containing hundreds of thousands of gallons of chemical contaminants has begun to move towards the light. The problem, writes the archaeologist Thora Thetersdottir, is not that things become buried deep in strata, but that they endure outlive us and come back at us with a force we didn't realize they had, a dark force of sleeping giants roused from their deep time slumber. Deep time is the chronology of the Underland. Deep time is the dizzying expanses of Earth history that stretch away from the present moment. Deep time is measured in units that humble the human instinct, epochs and eons instead of minutes and years. There is a dangerous comfort to be drawn from deep time. An ethical lotus eating beckons. What does our behavior matter when Homo sapiens will have disappeared from the earth in the blink of a geological eye? Viewed from the perspective of a desert or an ocean, human morality looks absurd, crushed to irrelevance. A flat ontology entices. All life is equally insignificant in the face of eventual ruin. We should resist such inertial thinking. Indeed, we should urge its opposite. Deep time is a radical perspective, provoking us to action, not to apathy. For when viewed in deep time, things come alive that seemed inert. New responsibilities declare themselves. A conviviality of being leaps to the mind and the eye. The world becomes eerily various and vibrant again. Ice breathes, rock has tides, mountains ebb and flow, stone pulses. We live on a restless earth.
Excellent. And that book, I mean, actually both of those books kind of really unsettled me and really changed how I interacted with the manner in which I wrote about the natural world. So thank you. And I know that a lot of people are learned so much from, especially from Underland. I'm just reminding people to pop their Q&A question box questions in. I see that there's one here. Oh, it's just a hello from North Carolina. I'm going to ask, and it flows in quite nicely. I've noticed, I was drawn in like towards a flame. I noticed that you've been involved in something called Moth recently. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that?
Yeah,
What's the sea
I'd
thing?
love to. Yeah, the mothy theme. I'll just stick. I think that might have come through.
Oh, it did. Brilliant.
Link in the chat to anyone who's interested. Yeah, it's called the Moth, the More Than Human Rights Collective, and it's really an American universities have these really fascinating groups they pull together. They call them laboratories or accelerators, and they bring interdisciplinary groups together with, around a powerful idea or set of ideas which perhaps hasn't gained mainstream traction, and find ways of really enriching it, sharing it, communicating it. This is one. It's founded by an incredible Colombian human rights and natural rights lawyer called Cesar Rodriguez Garavito, who is in fact downstairs as I speak, and just one of the most inspiring people I've ever met. It has core members from the Sarayaku people of the Ecuadorian Amazon, Patricia Gualinga, just one of the most inspiring indigenous leaders that there is. It's wonderfully various, and yes, it seeks to recognize what is, in fact, a very ancient idea, the oldest of ideas, the one we have forgotten, which is that the world is alive beyond us, that a river may be thought of as alive in ways that exceed the sum of the lives it contains, and that the same may be true of forests. And so what seems counterintuitive to those, as it were, those of us who have been, we're back to the grammar question, we're all the inheritors of a post-Enlightenment rationalism, whether we want to be or not, that at some level has deanimated the world, has mortified the world for the purposes of better extraction and conversion into resource. So the Moth Collective tries to undo that thinking, and it's like many people are, but it's been the work of many hands to make it, and it will be the work of many to undo it.
Fantastic. I'm going to check if we have an actual question here. Yeah, from Fergal Canton. Has Robert any views on the river dance reenactment of the anthropomorphizing of the male and female rivers?
Wow, I don't, because I haven't heard of it. It sounds absolutely fascinating. My immediate response is that I'm slightly suspicious of genderings of rivers one way or another, partly because I wouldn't dare say myself, and I see them as so poly everything.
Totally.
That I wouldn't want to gender them either way. Who, so the best I can come up with is who, the river who, and then it as a kind of, not as the itting objectifying pronoun, but the kind of the uncertain it, the undefining it. If anyone wants to tell me more about the river dance, anthropomorphizing, I'm all ears.
That was a great question. And just a reminder, we've got limited time. Anyone wants to pop a question in, let's get it in. If not, I've got sort of hundreds. So as someone who has kind of carved a life out of writing about place, Robert, I wonder, could you share with us one or two of the places, perhaps from childhood or perhaps from sort of current life, that have really sort of led you to be who you are today? You know, where are your places that really matter? You know, that's a big question. It's
a wonderful question, and you've written so well about this, and the ways that place can wound as well as heal, and root and unsettle you as well as root you. And I think you and I both have feelings that, what gets called nature writing is it should only be called that when nature is understood to being this great group noun that is inclusive of bombs and loss and moths and grief and nuclear waste, as well as beauty and hope and clear running rivers. So I suppose my first response to that is that I am always, again, wary of any account of place which says this story is buried here, for anyone who seeks to dig for it, because we know what the right does with that idea, that the idea that place holds stories that are intrinsic to it. This isn't what you were saying, but it's just a kind of just to bracket out that idea that this place holds that story, because as soon as we deal with a place that holds a single story, then certain people can't know that story, can't sing that story, can't tell that story. So I always say, landscape never speaks with a single voice. It's always choral, it's always polyphonic. But of course, each of us has heart places and hurt places. And I guess reluctantly, I must say that the landscape I've lived in for 25 years, the chalk lands of South Cambridge and the fenlands of North Cambridge have of course been formative. It's just taken me such a long time to come to terms with them.
Come to terms with that,
The cairngorms,
I knew the cairngorms. I mean, obviously. Jade Cuttle, what advice would you give to writers at the start of their journey writing a non-fiction book about the ways we read landscapes and our way into it? That's a gorgeous question, Jade.
Is that Jade? Wonderful. I think I can say that Jade is coming to work with me at Cambridge as my PhD student from the autumn, and it's lovely to hear you here, Jade. So so the question is,
it's about writers who want to write about I've lost the question. It's about the natural world and our way into it.
Well, I suppose the answer I always give is to send people to other books. To ask them what books they draw from, and then to tell them the ones that I drink from and draw from. I have a kind of go-to shelf, and I think and I would mention. So Jade, I think I would love to hear what books mean the most to you, have shaped you the most. One that I would commend to everybody, it's one Kerri and I were talking about earlier this evening, is Elizabeth Jane Burnett's very new book on moss and all points beyond. And there's an opening to it in particular which really swept me away. It's such a bold opening, and we, nature writing about nature, because it sediments itself so quickly, it kind of congeals into forms of cliche very readily. And Elizabeth Jane, in the opening pages of that, just sweeps it all away and tries something completely new. And it's quite rare to meet something completely new. When I met Kerri's writing for the first time, it was completely new voice to me. And that happened with Elizabeth Jane as well.
She's incredible. I mean, she really is. And I would agree that the way into writing about the natural world is reading about the natural world. And I thoroughly agree We have quite a few other questions. I'm going to try grouping them together a little bit. We have from Hilary White, Robert, I'm wondering, do you ever think about Tim Robinson's legacy as rising sea levels reshape the map lines of our coastal regions? I mean, I know you adore him, Rob.
Yeah. Well, how wonderful to have Tim's name join us, kind of flutter over us like this great, generous ghost of a moth that he was. He died, as many of you will know, in 2020, not long after Mairead, his lifelong partner, also died. They just pretty clear they couldn't inhabit the mortal world without one another. So yeah, one of the absolute giants of place writing, I would say, in any language. And I sometimes compare the work that he did across thousands of pages and maps as a sort of Proust of place, though I'd always rather read Tim than Proust. And he created a terrain, really, a terrain.
Yeah.
And I think his influence is only kind of, we're just sort of beginning to comprehend the magnitude of the thinking he was doing, and he foresaw so much, and I think the idea of his maps being kind of subsumed. He once made a floor-sized map and loved the fact that people could walk all over it and leave their marks over the map of marks. And so he was always about marks, and I think, you know, he'd have been fascinated while also troubled about the fact that rising sea level is changing the marks on the map. Yeah,
completely. That was a really good question. Right, we have very limited time. Let's see, I'm going to pick one out here. Someone has asked you to share your reading list. I think we might do that separately, and I might pop it on to the Irish Writers Centre, if that's okay. And as for the resources for children, I think we'll do it that way as well. Autumn Brown has asked, beyond writing with and about place, could you speak about writing with / working with scientists as writers and artists? How do you manage those relationships? What's your position on the synergies between art and science? That's a really good question.
It's a wonderful question. And I mean, I've always been like a little Labrador puppy with scientists. I just kind of bound along by their sides going, ha, tell me things. What's that rock? What's that fungus? I wrote my master's thesis many years ago on the relationship between science and poetry. At that time, a lot of poets were deeply engaged with the kind of post-Einsteinian physics and quantum physics. And you know, Coleridge went to the Royal Society of lectures on chemistry, and when asked why he was there, he said, so I can deepen my stock of metaphors. Yeah, I think there's a beautiful traffic has always moved between scientists and artists, and it is a two-way traffic. I was just speaking today about the fact that the writer of the short story, which became that astonishing film Arrival, about trying to understand the language of a fully alien species, if you haven't seen it, it's dazzlingly premonitory. And we are basic, you know, we live in a world of arrivals. It's just they've been here, they watched us arrive, and so we are just, you know, beginning to learn how whales speak to one another. Of course they sing, of course they speak, of course they name one another. And so scientists are, there is a lyricism to precision that scientists possess, and also this wonderful knowledge which is porous to us as well, I think. And we non-scientists, artists, writers give back. So, you know, I think it's a mutualism, an old mutualism.
And I love how in your work you've got that scientific sort of element of it, but you've also got this really, and you know, you write children's stories and you create, you know, with musicians as well. And I feel like something that's really inspiring is to watch someone who I suppose who's part of the scene in a way, but who's actually pushing those, like blurring those boundaries, I guess, in the same way that you talk about blurring the human to more than human boundaries. In a way, it's kind of just an extension of what you believe in. And
well,
I want
to try, and that's really lovely to hear. I think it's really important that every book, it's incredibly easy to become, Martin Amos's phrase, fluent in one's own vernacular, you know, and that's that's just like sinking into the sofa, really.
Yeah,
So I
totally.
try to think what can language do here, or form do here. I don't necessarily achieve it, but I want
No.
to try it. I want to try it.
Totally. Well, I am going to ask one more question quickly from the audience, and then I'm going to finish with my last one because I know we need to let you go. There was one I noticed. Was there one in chat as well that looked at
The wonderful comment from Kelly about, which is
Donna?
about more than human rights, and the light bulb moment that she's just had. If people scroll up to that, it's wonderful.
Totally.
Yeah.
Donna from Science Foundation Ireland in Dublin, research funding agency. I'd love to know your thoughts on the importance of researchers considering narrative and storytelling and communicating their work. That's really a very good question. What's your view on that?
Well, it sort of answers its own question, really, which is that they're incredibly important. Scientists can be glorious storytellers. Juliana Furci, the founder of the Fungi Foundation, who I just urge all of you to find and follow on Instagram particularly, is just one of the most inspiring scientists I know, and one of the best communicators and storytellers. She's utterly inspirational. So, and science is a vast and complex story, as we know. Constructivism has shown us this, and the other thing I would say is that Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's one of the great science communicators, braiding sweetgrass is a braid of indigenous knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge, if you want to call it that, hard botanical science. And the third in the weave is story. She tells stories, and you meet them and you don't quite know why the story is being told to you, and then gradually it declares itself. So yeah.
Completely. I think it might be a nice place for us to sort of wrap up. So I'm going to ask you, Rob, something we were talking about Wales. You were talking about Wales a moment ago so beautifully, and we had Doreen Cunningham on recently, who wrote Soundings, this absolutely gorgeous book about Wales and motherhood. And something Doreen and I were talking about, and a few other people, Eski's on the call, Eski Britain, is how that motherhood for me and for other mothers, we often get asked as writers about the climate, how did becoming a mother change your views on the climate emergency? But I feel like I want to ask you that, because I feel like mothering is something that fathers can do as well. And I want to ask you, Robert, how has parenting your child, how, when your first child was born, and how did that change how you interacted with the emergency that we're living through?
Oh, that's a wonderful phrase, Kerri. Mothering is something that fathers can do, and I
completely.
I really, I'll hold that. Yeah, well, you sort of, there's that Duncan Macmillan play Lungs, which deals a little bit with this both before and after birth, but you don't know, because at the time you're plunged into the maelstrom of those early days and weeks and months, and really there's nothing almost beyond that universe, tiny universe you come to inhabit, which seems the whole world and more. And then slowly it settles, doesn't it? And sight lines change. And I suppose I come back to the line which in a way activated the whole of Underland, which is, are we being good ancestors? And the easy version of that question is, are we being good parents? The slightly harder version is, are we being good grandparents? And the really hard version is, are we being good ancestors? Because to be a good ancestor means to be responsible to people you will never meet. And perhaps if becoming and it's not it's not that only parents can become good ancestors, of course, but for me it activated the beginning of that longer intergenerational view.
Completely. And when I think of Underland, the image that always comes to mind is yourself and your son at the end. It's like, I always liken it to that scene in Virgil's Aeneid when, Aeneid is carrying his father and the household gods and his child, just this sense of the intergenerational nature in the face of emergency.
Oh, I'm so glad that resonated. I wrote it without knowing anything other than I had to write that was how the book ended, with a child
Totally.
vanishing and then returning.
Because I don't think we realise fully that parenting is something, as you say, like we can all do. We don't have to. I mean, that's what I really love about, say, Robin Moll's Kimmery's work and Elizabeth Jane Burnett. Just that discussion of how that, you know, we can all mother, we can all parent, and we can all leave a good trace. Very quickly, in 1 minute, would you mind telling me the thing that brings you the most hope, and then we'll let you go and dance?
Well, it's not. Nothing is permanent sustenance. But I think standing on the shores of the banks of a river that is so polluted that it has literally no species in it. Literally no species survive within its water in North Chennai in India, southern India, with the young people who are so determined to change that for the good of the fisher folk who have to try to ply lives within it, and the creatures who want to live in it. It's just like they should have given up. There's the baseline is as shattered and low as could be, and yet there they are working for it. It's just like, right, okay,
they remember.
That's the work.
Yeah, they remember. I'm really, really sorry I didn't manage to get to everybody's questions. We've been inundated this evening, naturally so. But what I will do, Robert, is separately, when you've got your own time, we'll look at that little list, just a few books that you would recommend. And I really want to thank you so much for your time, and thank our audience for the great questions, and have a beautiful evening.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of it, folks. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a real one. Thank you.
It's been gorgeous. Bye, Robert. Slán go. Bye. So that was really quite something. I hope that everyone really got something from that. I would now like to ask if our equally esteemed guests at the Moth magazine would like to join us.
Hello.
Hello.
Lovely to be here. We feel quite humbled.
It's absolutely gorgeous to have you both here. Just I'm so glad the way it's worked out this time with it just seems like a perfect pairing. I was saying that earlier in the green room, that we you know, Rob was saying that he really loves the fact that there's this moth theme kind of going throughout, and I was saying that there's a lot of different links. There's, you know, there's like, yeah, anyway, we'll go into that in a minute, but I just want to thank you for coming and joining us. And I would love to firstly ask you if you could describe for us, because you have a real I guess there's a whole plethora of things that you have done and that you are still currently doing as a creative team. What are you? Can you tell us?
Well, first of all, we're husband and wife.
Yeah.
And we met in a city and very quickly moved to the countryside. So we were in London and we had a baby, and we knew that we wanted to bring up our children in the countryside. That was the first thing. So we moved back to Cavan, so we're on the border here in Ireland, and it's where I grew up, but I grew up in the suburbs, but we moved out to rural Cavan. We started the Moth in 2010, and not really knowing where it was going to lead us, but we knew that we wanted to be kind of autonomous and be able to work from home and, you know, create our own little universe. And so started with the Moth magazine, and quickly after that we started the Moth Poetry Prize, and we also run the Short Story Prize, and then we started the Caterpillar, which is a junior version of the Moth, in 2013. We then 3 years ago we started the Moth Nature Writing Prize, because along the way we had kind of discussed the idea of a nature writing magazine, but it wasn't a feasible thing for us to do because we just couldn't afford to start publishing another magazine. So we came up with this idea of the Nature Writing Prize. We'd published Richard maybe in one of the first issues, an extract from his book Weeds, and so we approached him to ask him if he judged the inaugural prize. So that's what we do. We also, you know, we're touring a play. Will's acting as Oscar Wilde in a play, and we have 3 children. And like I said, we work from home. The office is right next door to the house. We're rewilding our garden, and yeah, that's what else. What else can I say?
That's right. I mean, I hadn't actually heard of mothrights.org. Naturally, we'll be speaking to our lawyers about that.
I mean, it is. I've always been I've been very inspired by what you do for a really long time, and what I love about how you're doing things is that you're creating your lived reality based around your creative selves. And I suppose that that's something that in late level capitalism we don't really get to see that much. So what we see quite often is we see, for instance, really huge, like kind of very, very corporate, large collectives doing really well, and they've got, you know, a team of like 100 people. Or we see kind of very, very small startups, and they're never really quite peaking. But something about how you've done it seems to work really well. And I wonder, was that always intentional, that there wouldn't be a real separation between, you know, how you earn your crust and what it means to be a creative person in a world that you love, you know, in the natural world?
Yeah, I think one major kind of driver for us was to try and do something ourselves, you know, and not be dependent on anybody funding our projects. And to that end, we've been able to find our own way, and we've made mistakes, but we've also been driven by the fact that we've had to, you know, try and make a living. And obviously it's helped that we live in this kind of rural environment where, you know, that we you know, haven't needed to generate a huge income. So that's, you know, that's been good. So sorry, go on.
I think what Robert said about being a good ancestor kind of rang true as well, because you have that feeling as a parent that you want to do the right thing, you know. Completely.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, I think we also did have the commercial imperative that we needed to try and make a living. We both had some commercial experience. Yeah. So we were able to, you know, use that. We were very lucky, of course. One needs a lot of luck, you know, but we were able to use that and combined with our kind of passions as a team, you know, to create something that was viable.
Completely. And we had the guys from Home Tree Charity on recently, and that was something that they took. There was one person on, and Matt talked a bit about luck as well, and how that it's a really good thing to be placed in a position of luck where you can then go and do something really good, where instead of it going that way of just one person has the ability and they just kind of squander it. It's a very, you know, it would always have been a kind of a wary route to go down, you know, sort of publishing at all, I guess, is always going to be difficult. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about the decision to have a nature writing prize, because I think it's very inspiring and very original in many ways. We often see competitions, and if they're kind of like an umbrella term, they'll have, you know, maybe they'll have children's writing, maybe they'll have poetry, they'll have a novel or short story section, but very unusual to see, you know, you've got the poetry prize, and then you've also got the short story prize, and then you've also got the nature writing prize. And I wonder what, so it was linked with the idea of wanting to have a magazine, but where did that impetus come from?
Yeah, well, okay, so it's like Becky said before, we did have this idea about producing a nature writing magazine. It was actually a lot of our work, you know, by virtue of the fact that we were interested in, you know, nature, was about nature anyway. It was all great. It was great work, you know. So, you know, in a sense, it wasn't an easy decision to take, because on one hand, obviously you want to celebrate nature writing, but you also don't want to marginalize writers. You don't want anyone to think, well, I'm a nature writer, you know, oh, well, I'm a crime writer. You know, what we want to celebrate was wonderful writing, but however, it's just like, it's too late not to do that now, not to try and create a platform to showcase writing that is not only enchanting but also, you know, informative and persuasive. So that's really the position we were in, and obviously we'd had a track record of creating the other prizes, some of which are the kind of, you know, very established and the largest of their type. So we thought it was an opportunity, a really good opportunity to do that. So that's really where that came from.
Because I think, you know, a lot of your work that I've read in your magazines, you're right, it is like totally nature writing, what we would view as nature writing. I mean, I'm thinking of something like, you know, you had My Blue Hen that won the Forward Prize. I mean, it's, even thinking about it, I have shivers the whole way down me. I mean, but for me, I mean, for people who don't know the poem, I would thoroughly recommend that you look it up. It's just this exquisite, gorgeous, philosophical, spiritual nature. It's beautiful. But you know, you're right, you have always kind of had nature writing, but as you say, Will, it's because the world around us has kind of compartmentalized writing and compartmentalized things so much. We almost don't have the choice to sort of say, okay, no, we're not gonna do it.
Yeah, I guess yeah, we just wanted to use our position, you know, to try and do something to like I say, create a platform to celebrate great writing and bring it to the fore in that way, especially as, you know, the notion of nature writing was you know becoming a thing.
Totally.
And it embraces poetry, fiction, non-fiction. That's what I love about the prize, you know. So,
and like you say, Kerri, isn't all really good writing? Isn't that nature writing, really? You know.
Totally.
I mean, it's all about how we are in the world. If it's poetry, so much of poetry draws on nature, obviously, but also in fiction, you're thinking, as you're writing fiction, you're thinking about where that person is placed in the world. So you can't get away from it.
Yeah.
Completely. And Lynn, who started this wonderful resource with the Irish Writers Centre, she's very inspiring for me as a writer, because she's predominantly a fiction writer, but she always says, you know, in this, and this is something that Rebecca Tomash also talks about, just in this day and age, we kind of almost have to write about the climate crisis. We almost have to. There is an impetus there, you know, as a writer, no matter what we write, if it's children's stories, if it's poetry, if it's, you know, if it's not mentioned in some way, it's quite difficult to trust the writer. So it's very interesting what you said about but what I wanted to ask you, and I think this will really help some people listening in who are kind of at the beginning or halfway through their, you know, their manuscript or something like that, or their poetry work. You have been very inspiring to me, because you've always just caught people just before they've made it. You've got something, you've got that eye. My partner is really like that with trends of particular forms. I think some people are just like that. You know, you've had, like I said, My Blue Hen, and Claire Louise Bennett was with you guys pretty early in, and a few other folk that I can think of. What are you looking for? What were you looking for when stuff came into the magazines when they were still going, and what are you looking for when stuff comes into you? What signifies good writing to you?
It's what you like.
I don't know. It's what you like. It's as simple as that. It's being true to yourself, I think, is important as an editor or a judge or whatever you are, and to your taste, and trusting yourself enough to like something, even if it feels a bit off or a bit awry somehow, as new writing often does. It's often kind of makes you feel uncomfortable because it's so kind of raw or new or different, and it's pushing all the time. It's pushing the boundaries of what fiction or poetry is, and I love that. And that's what I'm drawn to. So so it's as simple as that. It's being authentic, you know, sort of like say trusting your it's instinct, you know.
Totally.
I think it's also important not to be seduced by
By
what
trends
you
or
might
fashion, yeah.
perceive as a great writer, or I think from the beginning we never sought to chase people who we thought were really well-known people who might help us with the
Totally.
magazine. We want to publish your work and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It was all unsolicited material.
all
We remained open
unsolicited.
to everybody.
Merit-based.
Didn't chase well-known writers for work. We might have done for the first issue or two just to get us going, but after that it was all unsolicited. And yeah, I think that was key, really.
To create something, I mean, the best art collections are those collections that people have put together, but just because they love them, and they love them and they get huge pleasure out of them. And to some degree, whether anybody else likes them is neither here nor there.
Yeah, totally.
And I think we were lucky in the sense that, speaking of Becky, really very little to do with this, the fact that people like what Becky had chosen was great, At the same time, they might have said, well, we don't like that stuff, and they might not have bought the magazine or what have you, But I think it's just to have confidence in what you like, because otherwise it's not worth it. You must choose what you like, and other people can, make of it what they will.
So I mean, if you say entering a prize like that, the same goes for when you're writing as well. You have to be brave enough to write like yourself and not like anybody else. And I think so people will notice that.
Completely. That's such a good point. And like what we often, because of this pigeonholing that happens within the industry, and even it happens when you go on to, I don't know, Waterstone's website. It's like, if you like this writer, you'll also like this, and this. And it's actually, sometimes that works and it's great, but sometimes it's a bit, okay, so who am I trying to make myself like in a way? And I love that you've said
it's very intimidating,
the authenticity.
Yes, and not to write with a view to becoming famous or published. Write for your own pleasure. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, keep on with your job. Or if you want to make money, become an accountant or work in the city or whatever. But
totally.
I come from a family of accountants. My three brothers are accountants.
Yeah.
My dad's an accountant.
We have a question in. Brilliant. We have a question in. What evidence is there that nature writing is reaching administrators, land professionals, politicians, and businesses? Or is that not a point, or not the point?
Kerri, I think that's an absolutely marvelous question. I think that's a marvelous question, because I think the great power of nature writing is the subliminal impact of it, in the sense that we are preached at all the time about various issues, politics, the climate, and everything else. But if you can produce something which inspires somebody in a sublime way, they can't put their finger on why they've changed their mind, why their eyes have been opened by something, but it works somehow, and it's helped them make up their own mind without us telling them what to do or what not to do. So in as much as it's a really good question, it's also a difficult question to, it's a difficult thing to quantify.
Exactly. Can I just remind people, if you do want to ask a question, this is a really great opportunity. Just pop it into the Q&A and we'll get to it. So something that I wanted to ask you, you were speaking about rewilding your garden, and Will, I always love the kind of like the variety of insects that you showcase on your Instagram. So how important is it for you to do that? What does it mean to you to be giving your garden over to other creatures, and what does that mean to you?
Well, I tell you what, I discovered something this year which is extraordinary to me, and that is, if you leave your garden or your land to nature, these glorious plants start producing flowers, one after another, because they want to attract pollinators, So you leave them all, and they all start flowering in an extraordinary, synchronized kind of behavior, because there needs to be a continuous source of pollen for all of these creatures. It's so much, it's infinitely more glorious than something we can put together from the perspective of a gardener, you know. And from tonally, these colors are something you can't replicate. Everything works. Everything just works exquisitely. So it's massively important for us to do that. Well, for me, it's, you know, Becky has, you know, we see this now. When you start with, you see the dandelions, and then you see the buttercups, and then you see the cow parsnip and the, you know, and the cow parsley, and now we've got, you know, we've got the willow herb, and now we've got the thistles, and they all start coming up, and it's just exquisite to watch it happen.
Totally. And there's been so much dialogue. I love hearing you talk about this. There's been so much dialogue this week within the sort of within the land stewardship / gardening world, because of a comment made in a big paper about sort of the ridiculousness almost of wild gardening, like it's just some kind of fad. And there's been a real, and what I've loved is on my Instagram, you know, I follow like Marshall Farrell, who's this incredible, really inspiring gardener who's written a really good book coming up with Canongate Uprooted. And she's, you know, been sharing lots, and some other people I follow have been sharing, you know, how important it is to actually allow the, as you said, to allow the garden to do its thing, and how that actually, if you think about it, and we're obviously all living on Irish land as well, how it is a form of sort of like really gently challenging, you know, the colonialism that this land has gone through, the violence that's been associated. Marshall and other Black writers will write about it in relation to their ancestors and what's happened on land. And actually recently, Superfolk, who are this really lovely team in Mayo, husband and wife team in Mayo, and they did a little Instagram story about how important it is if you're putting wildflower seed into your garden or onto verges, that it should be native to your area, like it should, because otherwise what you're doing is you're taking up growing space, which is reducing those pollinators' ability to get what they need, and actually to watch, you know, if you've got a big enough space, and to give it over to the wildflowers that would be there naturally is really, it's actually quite a revolutionary stance.
Yeah, well, we're quite impatient. You know, we're used to having everything we want when we want it. We want a wildflower meadow, so we go out and we buy wildflower, and we expect it to happen right away. Actually, don't worry about a wildflower meadow. Just let things just start to happen, and these plants find a way into your garden by themselves. And if it doesn't, it's not suitable, and they won't take root. But they will. They'll kind of sneak in, and they'll find the right place. You know, quite often when you garden, you plant a tree somewhere and it doesn't take off. That never happens in nature. You know, it finds a place and it works, you see, and you just let it go and be patient and just watch it grow and watch it develop and try and learn about it, you know.
Totally. Janet Heron has said, we let our blackberry briars grow to see what would happen. The place was full of little birds who got fat on the berries. The briars were alive with birds.
We can hear, we're looking at them right now, and we can hear sparrows, dozens of sparrows in amongst the blackberries. It's so rewarding.
I actually, I've been deaf since I was a baby, and in one ear, and I recently got a hearing aid, and the most extraordinary thing about it is the bird song. So it's like, initially it was like I had a kind of forest in my head. It's just the most amazing.
That's such a beautiful image. That's really gorgeous.
I don't know if we can flip the camera. I'll show you where we are. Hang on.
Yeah, please do.
That's outside the office.
Look, it's beautiful. So gorgeous.
Yeah,
so
you know,
gorgeous.
it's important to understand also that these things you can't expect everybody to adopt this, you know, immediately. You know, it can start just by letting little areas of the garden grow, understanding a little bit about them. Change is hard for people to accept. you know, and it happens very quickly.
Hard
you know.
in suburban gardens as well. You know, we have our own space out here, you know, we're just surrounded by fields, whatever. But if you're in a little suburban garden and your neighbour's giving you dirty looks over the fence, it's difficult.
Totally. I know what you mean. One of the most inspiring women I know is a grower in Mullingar in Westmeath, and she's in she's in a housing estate, and her garden is just completely wild. But she's also got this little strip that she got off the council just in front of her garden, just on the concrete. And I used to go and buy flowers from her, and you could notice that her having her garden like that really did somehow give permission to other people around, because you could see little bits of wildness too.
Exactly.
It was really quite interesting. Kelly has said this answer about gardening is so similar to the previous answer about the effects of nature writing, equals don't be actively trying to force things, just plant seeds, and if it's suitable it will take. Yeah, it's a really gorgeous point. I wanted to ask you both something that I have been increasingly asked, and I have been increasingly asking people. And I asked Robert, how has your relationship, if your relationship with the climate emergency has changed at all since becoming parents, and if so, how?
Yeah, I mean,
well, I think being a parent polarizes everything anyway. But yes, I mean, of course it does. I mean, it makes you want to protect you know, you want to protect this glorious place so your children will be able to thrive in it, and also that they will look after it, to try and teach them about it and educate them so they will be better guardians of the planet than perhaps we have been, or previous generations.
Will's actually, he's the chair of the Parents Association, and all he does is plant trees, and but we're going to build a pond at the school.
Turning the school into a nature reserve. But
spot on.
Yeah, of course it has. It does. It at the same time, what you've got to concentrate. You've got to also instill hope in your children that things can change for the better. That there are success stories, you know, and that they can affect change. So, you know, you don't want them to be too anxious.
Yeah, it's a fine line, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. No, it is. And Amanda Bell has said, Amanda's an incredible writer, put a sign saying this is an ark in the wild garden. See Mary Reynolds' book on this it's very inspiring. wearetheark.org. They also have an Instagram account, and it's this idea of these kind of like the biblical story of the ark. So this tiny safe haven where all of the future and all of the hope is contained. So as long as we've kind of got enough of those dotted around, and I think you can actually place your space on a map and everything, as long as we've got enough of those around, then we can have a real kind of deep hope. Before we finish off, I would like to finish by asking something I ask all my guests. What brings you both hope?
Well, I think, you
it's
know,
a big question, in fairness.
alluding to what Becky was saying earlier on about the work I do, not work, it's fun I have with the children at the school that my children go to, planting all these trees, you know, and you see them getting really excited about it. And this year, as last year, we started this thing where each child gets an oak tree, a sapling oak tree when they graduate. The oak tree happens to be the symbol of the school, so they can plant it in their own gardens or somebody else's garden. And it's lovely when the children come up and say, where should I plant this, and how big is it going to get? And I think that gives one, gives one hope.
And the green team,
yeah.
the children with their
Yes.
their clipboards.
Yeah, and they go,
They stop the parents idling.
They go around with posters saying no idling.
So they've
Having
so
said
they're
that,
there
when
with their
I was digging a hole for a tree, and I've been doing it all day with each different class, different native tree. And one of the children, I said to them, all put a handful of earth into the hole and say something nice about the tree and how we're going to look after the tree and how much you like the tree. And one child just looked at me and said, "The whole world doesn't revolve around you."
Check your privilege.
A little bit, yeah.
Well,
That's very
so
receptive child.
So basically you're brought it's kind of the little flitter and the little oak, the tiny oak trees bringing you hope. That's a really gorgeous sort of a really gorgeous place to wrap up. It's been really gorgeous to have you on, and a very inspiring conversation. I would thoroughly recommend everyone check out the Moth magazine online, and do keep us updated on everything that you're doing, because I'm sure we will see lots more from you, creative crew.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, and Betty and everybody at the Writers' Centre, and Robert too. It's really, really delightful.